You guys can grab a seat. Good morning, Citylight. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We have a really exciting way for you to hop in. We're talking about money for the next 3 weeks. So that'll be fun. No, actually, it will be exciting. We're going to be in 1 Timothy 6 for the next 3 weeks in our series called Future Treasures, where we're talking specifically about our wallets. And there's a reason why we're doing that. The first reason is because the Bible talks about possessions and money over 3,000 times. It talks about love in the ballpark of 600 times. So more than 4 times as many times as the Bible talks about love, it talks about money and possessions. Does that mean that money and possessions are necessarily more important than love? Not necessarily, but I think that God knows distinctly that if we were to have one thing that we cling to, it's our money, our wallets, our stuff. And we got to remember, the Bible wasn't even written to Americans. The Bible was written to the Israelites. The Bible was written to the different churches in the beginning of the gospel, moving to the world, to places like Galatia, Thessalonica, things like that. That's what the Bible was written to, who the Bible was written to. Not even the wealthiest nation to ever exist, America. I'm convinced that if there were a letter written to Americans, it would talk about money more than the Bible already does, because we have more than we could ever need. And the Bible has things to say about that. So that's one reason why we're going through talking about our treasures, the things that we own, the stuff in our wallets. The second reason is I was listening to a podcast recently by an Australian preacher named Philip Jensen. And what he said, he was being interviewed by a woman who was from America, and they were talking about 1 Timothy 6. And he started chuckling, but it was almost just like out of despair. He looks and he says, Americans, including you, he calls out this woman that's interviewing him, he says, have this deep-seated problem that American capitalism has produced such a deep seed of materialism in the church that it's rotting it from the inside. And so you can say what you want about capitalism. I'm not giving a comment on capitalism, but one of the results of it is it has produced in us a deep seed of materialism that is rotting us from the inside. And we all feel that. Like when we talk about generosity and our prayer lives, it's the two things that surefire. Everybody's like, yeah, I could pray more, or yeah, I could be more generous. And that's why we're going through this, because if we don't talk about it, then we're avoiding a conversation that the Bible talks about. And if we don't talk about it, there is something that we need to go through, and that's seated deeply in our hearts, that our culture's telling us all of the wrong information. So that's why we're going through it. And just so we're all aware of kind of where we're going to go every single week, you will hear this phrase every week for the next 3 weeks. And it's live below your bracket. Live below your bracket. There's a lot of confusion on, okay, as Christians, are we just supposed to be poor? Like, do we have to give everything up? And then there's also confusion of how do we live if that's not the case. And the application that we want to drive through every single week for the next 3 weeks going through 1 Timothy is we want to say live below your bracket. That the Bible actually calls Christians to see the life stage, the socioeconomic bracket that we live in, and to live below our means to free ourselves up to be generous. That's what the Bible would call us to. So we're going to talk about what that looks like, how that looks, but every single week you're going to hear live below your bracket. So that's the overview of the next 3 weeks. Now, this morning, though, we're talking specifically about contentment. Contentment. How do we get out of the rat race of always wanting the next thing? The materialistic, I don't have this, I need it. We get it. I don't have that now. We get it. I don't have that now. We get it. It's the age-old story of the kid in the grocery store, where I'm convinced for the last 80 years, there has never been a day in the United States where there hasn't at least been one kid rolling on the floor in the grocery store. Because the kid walks past, everything's fine, and 40 seconds later, it's like an exorcism's happening on the floor because the kid sees the new king-size Reese's cups. My mom's in the back, she's laughing because that was me. But man, I don't have that, I can't have it, I'm going to freak out because I don't have it. But here's the question, what would happen if we just handed the kid $100? Would that kid stop at the Reese's? No. He would just he'd clear out the whole candy shelf at the checkout. And what we have done, what we are oftentimes in America is we're the kid who's handed $100 and we don't stop. We have way more than we need for our essentials, and we just go crazy getting more stuff. And we learn over and over and over again that it doesn't work. It doesn't satisfy. And so what 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 through 8 are going to show us and teach us is that there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something better than just having more stuff. The 2 points for our sermon this morning, the first one is I'm good. The second point is here's why. I'm good, here's why. We're going to dive into verse 6. I'm good. It says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. So the first word of this verse is but, which means that it's referring to something that was previously talked about. Now in 1 Timothy, in chapter 3, here's what Paul says the reason why he's writing the book of 1 Timothy. In verse 14, he says, I hope to come to you soon, but I'm writing these things to you so that if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of truth. So the reason why 1 Timothy was written is because Paul wants to show Timothy how the church ought to behave. Because the church, us, we are a pillar of truth. And the greatest enemy of truth is falsehood. It's not anything else. The greatest enemy of the church is deception and falsehood. And in 1 Timothy 6, Paul is writing to Timothy about false teachers in their day that are trying to teach what we would call the prosperity gospel, which is the gospel that says we have Jesus so that we can be healthy and wealthy. Look back, so now we're back at 1 Timothy 6. Look at verse 5. About midway through, he's talking about these false teachers, and he says they're imagining that godliness is a means of gain. So here's what the false teachers are teaching. That we do godly things, that we have reverence for the Lord, that we walk in a way that's pleasing to God because it will benefit us in some way. It will end up being a means of gain for our lives. And it's going to be really easy. Like I could stand up here and just shout out names of prosperity gospel teachers, and part of me would love to do that. But there's always going to be new prosperity gospel teachers. How do we know? Because they were here, and they're still here now. So they're not going away. So I thought it'd be helpful that if we just understood a few things about the prosperity gospel, is that if anyone tells you that you can be rich and healthy, and that's Jesus' primary means for your life, they are a prosperity gospel teacher. If people tell you that you can speak things into existence for your well-being, they are false teachers. If people tell you that you can live your best life now, they are false teachers. And so, but it's really easy for us to stop there and say, okay, they're false teachers. Check. I'm at Citylight. I'm not following them. Perfect. But here's what we need to see is that all of us, maybe it's our culture, but more likely it's just the sin within us. We weave the prosperity gospel into our lives all the time. And it's this American dream Christianity that Jesus is sprinkled in there, but really my ultimate goal, he's a cover-up for my ultimate goal, which is pursuing my own wealth and riches and safety and security. And so while it's true that we're not the false teachers talked about in 1 Timothy 6, but those tendencies are deep within us that we need to understand that we can so often run to godliness for the sake of gain. But Paul has a better answer. Paul has a better solution. In verse 6, he says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. So if you compare the two sentences, godliness as a means for gain, but godliness with contentment is great gain. It's great gain. Godliness with contentment. And so as we're looking at this, we need to see something that the biggest word that Paul brings up is with contentment. That's what changes everything. That's what great gain is, godliness with contentment. So what does contentment mean? It's kind of strange, actually. The word that Paul uses for contentment in 1 Timothy 6, verse 6, he ripped it off from Stoic philosophers of their time who actually used the word to mean self-sufficient. That's the word that is translated as contentment, self-sufficient, which is bizarre for us because self-sufficiency is it's just not a Christian idea. The idea that I've got everything I need in here, and so no other factors actually influence me. That's not Christian. So why would Paul rep that off from Stoic philosophers? The reason is because as Christians, we have a relationship with God who purchased us and owns us and loves us and dwells within us and has an intimate relationship with us. And so in the same way that the Stoics would wrongly look out and say, I don't need anything else because I got everything I need in here, we can look at everything, and say, all of that doesn't matter, not because of what's in here, but because of him who dwells within me. Because of him who's in me, I don't need any of that. So in a way, it is self-sufficiency, that I am sufficient, but it's not ultimately because of myself, it's because of him. It's beautiful. That's the secret. I mean, that's what he says. In Philippians 4, Paul says, I've learned the secret to being in abundance and need and contentment, that I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Contentment is the key to great gain. And there's another thing that we have to realize too, is that if we are pursuing godliness because it will give us gain, godliness for a means of gain, then our God is not Jesus. Your end goal is your God. The end goal that you seek after is your God. Let me read you a quick little line from a Christian rapper named Skyler. Give him some credit because this was about 10 years ago. He said, don't be deceived by this funny biz. Give him some credit, but this next line, if you come to Jesus for money, then he's not your God, money is. Our ultimate goal is the God that we are serving. It's just a fact. And so every time that we are serving the Lord for the sake of gaining something else, he is merely just a means to the ultimate God that we're serving. And that's a problem. But look how godliness with contentment is the ultimate picture of Christian satisfaction. It's us saying God is actually satisfactory. God is actually worthy. He's actually worth my life. And no matter what else happens, he's still worthy. That's what we declare as Christians. And that's what it means to love God, is that all the other things happening externally don't matter because I have a relationship with the one who controls everything and loves me. It's completely different. Godliness with contentment is great gain. So we need to know that contentment, if you were to define it in one way, contentment is not us saying no to everything. Because that's what happens. You're like walking through the hardware store, and you're like, I'm a Christian. I don't need the tool. I don't need it. But that's not what godly contentment is. It's just not us constantly saying, no, I don't need it, I don't need it, I don't need it, I'm not supposed to want it, I don't need it. That's just religious behavior. That's us trying to change things. Godly contentment isn't us saying no thanks, but it's saying, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. It's not, I don't need anything. It's, I've got everything that I need. Everything that I need, I've already got. And so I don't need anything else because I've already got everything that I need. It's not no thanks, it's I'm good. I'm good, thanks. So why do we live in so much discontentment? I haven't been in pastoral ministry for a crazy long time, but it doesn't take a crazy long time to hear all the discontentment that we always talk about, me included. I'm not separated from this conversation. I will get more generous when I finally have the cushion, the financial place that I want to be in. I will marry that girl when I'm finally in a good financial spot. I love our house, but I would like for this thing to change. And then we fix that, and then I'd like for that thing to change. And then we fix that, and here's my list of 15 other things that'll just go in order, and it'll never end. I would be happy if I could have their job, their promotion, their salary. Man, could you imagine if we lived in this house? If we had X thousand amount of dollars in savings, then we'd finally be safe. I mean, it just rolls out of us. Pay attention to every single time that we talk about discontentment in our conversations. And why is that? Why do we look and see, man, I know that godliness with contentment is great gain, but I still live in discontentment? Here's two reasons why I think in our core we are discontent. And it's safety and satisfaction. Safety. We are uncertain about the future, which means I might lose my job. There might be tragedy. There might be some horrible accident that I can't control. And if I have enough, then no matter what happens externally, I can smile and say, I'm good. I've got the cushion. I've got it all figured out. Or satisfaction. Maybe if I had all the right stuff or all the right amount of money, then I would actually finally like myself. People would actually like me and respect me and see me. And if I had all that stuff, then maybe finally I would be content in myself. But here's the problem, is that as we get more stuff, both of those things crumble before us. Safety, as we get more stuff, it's the old saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. As I have a greater cushion, all that happens is I get more accustomed to that cushion, which means I have more assets, more diversification, more things that I need to protect and actually work to find safety of. Or maybe my lifestyle has increased because of my increase. And so I've got a greater lifestyle that I need to protect. It never ends. We never reach a point where we're like, oh, yeah, got it. Whew. We never reach it. The stakes just get higher for what we need to protect. We're never safe. And if we're satisfied and we try to be satisfied, it never works, because as we seek for approval and the contentment in our own lives through getting more stuff, the more that we have, the more self-doubt that just creeps in. But do people actually just like me for my stuff or me? Does anyone actually care about just me? What's the purpose of getting all of this stuff? We've felt them both. You chase after safety and satisfaction, and it will crumble horribly. There's got to be a better answer. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Now, there's an old theologian named Jonathan Edwards who wrote a book called Christian Happiness. Tim Keller preached a sermon on 1 Timothy 6 where he stole this from Jonathan Edwards. So I'm going to steal this from Tim Keller, who stole this from Jonathan Edwards. Here's the 3 reasons that Edwards gives in his book as to why the Christian can be content no matter what. Why you and I can be happy no matter what the external circumstances. Some people just picked up their pen for the first time because I didn't say it. Jonathan Edwards said it. Here's the 3 reasons. Said, the 3 reasons are: your bad things will turn out for good, your good things will never be taken from you, and your best things are yet to come. So I'm going to explain each one. Your bad things will turn out for good, your good things will never be taken from you, and your best things are yet to come. This is why, we need to hear this. And if you're not a Christian, not just like I prayed a prayer when I was younger, I went to church with my family. If you have not trusted in Jesus, if you see your whole life and it's running after things that aren't Him, if Jesus is not your Lord and Savior, I want you to understand this, that you will live your entire life with a never-ending quest for safety and satisfaction and never reach it. And yet Jesus Christ offers ultimate satisfaction for your soul. Your bad things will turn out for good. Romans 8:28 says this. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. So no matter what the storm is, no matter what happens, we have the promise that if we are His, God will walk with us through trial. God will walk with us through the lowest points that we will ever experience. And all things will ultimately work out for good. Does that mean that all problems will be solved? No. But it means that all things will work out for the good of His glory and for our good in some way, whether it is circumstantially or in our hearts. We know that the bad things, the worst things that could ever happen in our life, will turn out for good. Second, the good things cannot be taken from us. The greatest truths that we have as Christians, that we've been adopted into God's family, that though we were far off and sinful, Jesus came and saved us. That we're filled with the Spirit, that we have a security that can never be lost. that we are part of an unshakable kingdom. All of those beautiful truths that we cling to, there's not one thing that can happen to you on this earth that will change that reality. It can't change. All of the greatest things about you will never change. Newsflash, it's not even about you. The greatest things about you are that Jesus Christ is your brother, that the Father is your Father, that we've been adopted, that we can't lose it, that we can't be shaken. It will never be taken from us, no matter the circumstance. And the last is, the best is yet to come. The only thing that death does to the Christian is makes them better. It's the only thing that happens. When the Christian dies, the exact same gospel that we were clinging to before we died is the same gospel that we cling to after we die. The same Jesus that we worship while we're here is the same Jesus we'll worship after we're not here. The best things in our life are yet to come. Not circumstantially on this earth, but eternally. The best is yet to come. And when we put all those together, there's not a thing that could happen in your life that could lead you to be discontent. It will, because we will always be fighting this fight. But as we remember, the worst will be turned to good. The best cannot be taken, and the good cannot be taken, and the best is yet to come. We can be content. That's how we can look out. That's how CEO, mom of 3, college student, all life stages can all look and say, I'm content. No matter what's happening out there, I am content. I'm content. That's how Paul could look in Philippians 4 and say, I've got abundance and need, and I've learned the secret. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. He's content. Now what Paul does is he kind of makes not really a shift, but he elaborates on godliness with contentment is great gain. So he says, I'm good, here's why. Second point, here's why, as we move on to verse 7. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. I'm just going to read it again. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. This is the truth that we know this. We know that when we die, we are not taking any of our stuff with us. We don't go to the funeral in a U-Haul, we go in a hearse. The rich woman passed away, and they came up to the pastor and said, how much did she leave behind? And confused, he looked at him and said, well, she left it all behind. Like, it's just, we will never have anything that we take with us. But I don't know about you, but when I've always heard the old comment, you can't buy happiness, my immediate response every time is, yeah, but I would sure like to try. Somewhere deep in me is this thought that maybe everyone else who's been rich has just messed it up. And I bet if you gave me $1 million, I bet I could try. Like I could try to figure out how to buy happiness. But what I've realized as I've been looking at this text is that even that joke has such a horrible, deep-seated motivation that's wrong with me that I actually believe that if I just got a little bit more money, I would figure it out. And here's what I know is going to happen. There will be people in this room that will let this just bounce off, go their way, and we'll live our whole lives searching after the next thing, and then we'll get to our deathbed and come to the same conclusion that millions of other people have come to, and that's that it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it chasing after that. But my hope is that there is a small group of people in this church that would actually listen to the tax that has been paid by other people who have made the mistake and not regret it at the end of our lives. What Paul's doing when he says, we brought nothing into the world and will take nothing out, is he's actually referencing a similar comment that's already been made by other characters in the Bible. And so I just want to read these to you. I kind of want to do like a beginning to end timeline of this is like a biblical theology of contentment and people that have come to the end and realized that it is not worth it. And hopefully that small group of people can actually grab onto this and see, man, these are people that did it way bigger than I'll ever do it, and they were not satisfied. So I'm not going to live for that anymore. The first one is Job. Job, we don't have the exact timeline of when he lived, but we know it was early. Early in the creation narrative, in the history of the world, Job was early. And Job, Tom Rimple preached on it a few weeks ago, Job had everything. He was an entrepreneur. He had riches unlike anyone else, a huge family, a bunch of land, and it was all ripped from him in like hours. And this is the conclusion that Job came to when everything was ripped from him. His family, his riches, his agriculture, his land, his health. This is the conclusion he came to in Job 1. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Sound a little similar? Naked I came in, naked I will depart. Job came to the conclusion from a man who had everything and then went to nothing, both spectrums, that everything that I have, I will not leave with. The second one is Solomon. Solomon, so now we're a couple centuries later, Solomon was probably the wealthiest king that Israel ever had. Riches that probably far surpass Job. More money, I promise you, than any of us have. Probably than all of us have. The conclusion of in Ecclesiastes 5:15. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. That's the conclusion he came to. All of it is vanity. All of it. More money than we will ever have. So if you want to chase riches for your contentment, you will not beat Solomon. He did it all. And that's the conclusion he came to. Paul, in Philippians 4, we've already talked about it a couple times. If you're thinking, well, yes, that's the problem for the rich. It's not. Paul was in jail. He had nothing. And he said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I've learned the secret to being content. Every single one of these people experienced the extremes of life. All different people, all different socioeconomic brackets, all different, and they came to one resounding conclusion. You ain't taking it with you. It's not coming with us. So don't live for it. Don't live for what you can't keep. Because as we drop in that timeline, we see Job, Solomon, Paul, then us. How foolish would we be to make the same mistakes that they made? To run after the same things that they ran after? But church, we look to the future. We look to Revelation 22 when it says, the last chapter in the Bible, when it says they'll see his face and his name will be written on their foreheads and night will be no more. They will need no light or lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light and they will reign forever and ever. The sun is the most essential thing that we could have to human existence. It gives us warmth and oxygen through plants. I think that's how science works. And in heaven, we don't even need the sun because God is there. Don't make the mistake of selling out your life for something that will only pass away. Imagine this with me for a minute. This is a pretty ridiculous example. So imagine like one of the dumber times of your life. So probably college. If you're college students, you get it. If your college roommate came to you and was like, hey, look what I spent my tuition money on. And you were like, okay. He's like, it cost me a ton of money. I'm broke now. I drained it all and pulled out a box of Alka-Seltzer. You'd be like, what? What are you doing? You spent all your money on Alka-Seltzer? Like, go get a glass of water. He's like, okay. Put the Alka-Seltzer in it. It's gone. He would just look at it. Oh my gosh, I spent all my money on that? Think about how stupid that would be. And yet, all the stuff that we have is Alka-Seltzer in the ocean of eternity. It will drop in and be gone. In 200 years, everything that we own will be in a museum, if we're lucky, in a dump or in a garage sale. And we want to live for that? It's all gone. Think for a minute about how powerless this statement is. Here's what Paul is saying, is that grown men and grown women, us, we will leave the world with as much power, control, and influence as a baby. I just had a baby. She came into the world with no materials, no influence. No power. All she came with was a massive hospital bill. My daughter's not a liability, but on a spreadsheet. But I mean, here's the offense of it. Listen, every single one of us will leave this world with as much power, control, material wealth as a baby. No wonder why fear of death is the number one fear in all the world, because it collides all the other fears together. You no longer have control. You no longer have power. You no longer have your stuff. You no longer have anything. It's all laid bare, and you leave just as you came in. It doesn't add up to sell out for the world, for material things. But the message that we cling to, the gospel, it absolutely lines up. Because we cling to the message that we don't have control. We don't have power. Jesus has all power, all control, all authority. And because of that, it'll never change what we cling to. It's the same message that actually lines up with reality, that we will leave with nothing, but that's okay because our hope, our contentment is based off of nothing on this world. It's based on the sufficiency of Christ. And so if we cling to that, godliness with contentment is great gain. We say, I'm good, I don't need that stuff. We will have great gain because when we die, it never changes what we cling to. The last thing that Paul says in verse 8 is actually kind of interesting because he adds in verse 7, he adds on to it and says, for nothing that we brought in, we'll take nothing of it out. But then he adds kind of like a condition. In verse 8, he says, but if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. He's saying the necessities. The necessities are what we need for contentment, which is true. If we are starving to death, you won't be content. But I want us to understand that if we at all have the expectation of eating today, which I'm guessing most of us do, we are not in the category of worrying about necessities. If we can access water and shelter and we have outfits to choose from, then we're probably not in this category. But it is important to know that we need the necessities in order for our contentment to come forth. But this is also true spiritually. Here's the beauty. It says, but if we have food and clothing, we will be content. Jesus says this in John 6, I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me shall never thirst. The Bible tells us that we're clothed with Christ's righteousness. That our souls need food and clothing in order to be saved, in order to be satisfied, in order to be content. And that's what Jesus did when he came and died on the cross, is he gave us his body, the bread of life. And he gave us his righteousness through dying on the cross. So please hear me that if you have not trusted in Christ, your soul will never be content. Your soul will never actually survive without food and clothing, and you need the bread of life, and you need the righteousness of Christ. The second reason why this text is weird is because it sounds like all Christians need to be voluntarily in poverty. Because it says we got food and clothes, we're good. So does that mean that all of us that have more than food and clothes need to give up everything and then we'll be content? Is that what it's saying? And I would argue no for this reason. Austin will preach on this later, but in verse 17 of 1 Timothy 6, it says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. And then this, 18, for they are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. So Paul gives instructions to the rich. The solution is not that all people everywhere sell everything they have and live in poverty. Tim Keller put it this way, we need Christians in every neighborhood. If we just had poor Christians, then only the poor neighborhoods would hear the gospel from their neighbors. But it actually means that Christians will be in all neighborhoods. And that's a good thing, that the gospel is preached to all neighborhoods. But what that means for us is that we should be people that live below our bracket. Live below your bracket. That's what it would look like. If everybody in our church did this, I promise you our church, our city would look different. It would look different if Christians did this. Live below your bracket. Live below your means. So I'm going to close with this. Here's 4 ways that we can do this. 4 ways that we can actually live below our bracket. The first one is to identify what bracket you're in. Not like Google your tax bracket, but look around at your life stage, the neighborhood you live in, the people that you're around, and just start to observe, where are you socioeconomically? Where actually am I? Where's my bracket? The second thing is identify the difference between your necessities and your luxuries. There are plenty of things that we have that are luxuries that many people within our bracket, within our life stage, within our neighborhood would consider to be necessities. So it's not always bad to have luxuries, but we need to identify the difference between necessities and luxuries. When we identify that, look, this is the third, look and start saying no to luxuries that are not necessities, that other people in your bracket would not say no to. For the sake of freeing up money, capital, resources to be generous, to give freely. Say no to luxuries that other people in your bracket would say yes to. Which sounds really external, like we're always looking at the people around us. Well, they said yes to that, so I'm not going to say no to it. Not what I'm saying, but we know what our means are. Live below your means. And then the last one is that the more money that we make, the larger the gap should be between how we could live and how we do live. I'll say it again. The more that we make, if we're talking about contentment specifically, the more that we make, there should be a larger gap between what we could have and what we say no to. As we make more, the gap should only grow of what we're choosing to say no to so that we can say yes to generosity. Church, if we were a people that lived below our bracket, God would be crazy honored with our generosity. And we would make a crazy difference all over this city. Live below your bracket to free up money for generosity. And if you're thinking, this guy just wants my money, if we really wanted your money in a manipulative sort of way, we'd pass a plate and just stare at you. We don't do that because we want ourselves to have a gospel-shaped life that's obedient to Jesus in the way that he would have us be obedient, to experience joy in generosity that he would actually design for us. Now, as I close, I've been thinking about I've been thinking about money a lot in the last week, obviously. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, that money is a lot like carbon dioxide. What do you think? Agreed? Here's why. I had to do some research on carbon dioxide, by the way. Carbon dioxide is actually needed for us to live. It's the thing that keeps the earth warm. Otherwise, everything would freeze. We'd all be dead. We need carbon dioxide. But if we hold it in, if you just have carbon dioxide, you will suffocate and die. Money is a good thing that we need to live. It is not sin to have money. But if we only hold it in, if it never comes out, if we hoard it and sit on our pile of money, it will suffocate us until we die. It will kill us. Godliness with contentment is great gain. We can look and say, I'm good because I've got everything that I need. All this stuff is just a mist. It's all going to be gone. And all the essentials that I need for contentment, I already have. Everything that I need, I can look and say, I'm good, regardless of my circumstances. Let's be a people that say, I'm good. Here's why. Father, we thank you that you have given us 1 Timothy 6. We know that if you didn't tell us to be generous, we probably never would. But it's because you were so generous to us that we can be generous to one another. Our hearts never naturally gratified to generosity, but yours did. With no reason, no expectation, no deserving, you sent your son generously. You sent him to die on a cross so that we could have life. And we hope and pray that we would be a generous people who would live generously, who would live below our means, who would see the world for what it is, passing away, and would cling to contentment, godliness with contentment. Because the worst things will turn out for good. The good things cannot be taken from us, and the best things are yet to come. Thank you that that is true, and we eagerly await the best things that will come in eternity. In Jesus' name, amen.